David worked as a waiter at a fancy restaurant in Seoul, Korea. He moved there from America 2 years ago hoping for a fresh start. Life was hard for him. His boyfriend Marcus had hurt him badly, taking all his money and leaving him alone in a foreign country. David felt lost and scared every day. One evening, David served at a very important business meeting. The room was filled with rich men in expensive suits. At the head of the table sat Hyun-woo, a powerful Korean CEO everyone whispered about. He owned many companies, but people said he also had connections to dangerous groups. Hyun-woo was known for being cold, tough, and showing no feelings to anyone. David tried his best to serve the food perfectly, but his hands shook. He was tired from working 3 jobs just to pay rent. His waiter uniform was clean but worn from constant use. The restaurant's golden chandeliers cast warm light across the polished mahogany table where powerful men discussed business worth millions. David moved quietly between them, refilling wine glasses and placing dishes with trembling hands. Every muscle in his body ached from exhaustion, but he couldn't afford to lose this job. Not when rent was due in 3 days and he had barely enough money for food. Hyun-woo sat at the head of the table like a king on his throne. His sharp, tailored black suit fit him perfectly, showing his powerful build. His eyes were dark and calculating, watching everything in the room with the intensity of a predator. When he spoke, everyone listened. When he was silent, everyone feared what he might be thinking. The other businessmen laughed nervously at his cold jokes and agreed with everything he said. They knew his reputation, a man who built an empire through intelligence, ruthlessness, and connections that reached into both the legal and illegal worlds of Seoul. Suddenly, Marcus walked into that same restaurant with a beautiful woman on his arm. David's heart dropped. Marcus saw him and smirked, whispering something mean to his new girlfriend. They both laughed, looking right at David. Marcus looked exactly as David remembered, confident, handsome, and cruel. He wore an expensive designer jacket that David knew Marcus couldn't actually afford. The woman beside him wore a red dress and smiled at everything Marcus said, not knowing the kind of person he really was. Marcus's eyes found David across the restaurant, and that familiar smirk appeared on his face, the same expression he wore when he emptied David's bank account and disappeared without a word. David's hands began to shake worse than before. The wine bottle he was holding felt impossibly heavy. Memories crashed over him like waves: Marcus's promises of love, the apartment they shared, the morning David woke up to find everything gone. His money, his passport, his dignity. Marcus had left him stranded in a foreign country with nothing but debt and broken dreams. Marcus leaned close to his girlfriend and whispered something while looking directly at David. She glanced over at David and giggled cruelly. David could feel their mockery like physical blows. His chest tightened. The room started spinning. The golden lights of the chandelier became blurry stars. His vision darkened at the edges. David's chest felt tight. His vision got blurry. Before he could stop it, he collapsed on the floor, his body covered in bruises from an attack Marcus's friends had given him the night before when he refused to give them money. The whole room went silent. The expensive plates David had been carrying crashed to the floor, shattering into pieces. David's body hit the ground hard. His waiter vest rode up, revealing dark purple and blue bruises covering his ribs and arms. His face showed healing cuts and fresh marks from where Marcus's friends had cornered him in an alley the previous night, demanding money he didn't have. Every businessman in the room froze. Conversation stopped mid-sentence. Even Marcus's smile disappeared, replaced by a flash of something like guilt before his expression hardened again. Hyun-woo stood up quickly. He looked down at David's bruised face and arms. His cold expression changed. Something fierce appeared in his eyes. "Who did this?" Hyun-woo asked in a voice that made everyone scared. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Hyun-woo's voice was quiet, but it carried a threat that made grown men shift uncomfortably in their seats. His dark eyes scanned the room, looking at every face, searching for answers. The other businessmen had never seen him like this, his usual cold control replaced by barely contained rage. Hyun-woo knelt beside David, his expensive suit touching the floor without hesitation. His large hand gently touched David's shoulder, checking for injuries with surprising tenderness. Up close, he could see the full extent of the damage, bruises in the shape of fingerprints around David's wrists, a split lip that had barely started healing, defensive wounds on his forearms. These weren't accidental injuries. Someone had deliberately hurt this young man. David tried to speak but couldn't. His lips moved, trying to form words, but no sound came out. His eyes were filled with pain, fear, and shame. He wanted to apologize for disrupting the important meeting, for being weak, for collapsing in front of everyone. Hyun-woo gently lifted him and carried him out of the restaurant, shocking everyone. The powerful CEO, known for never showing emotion or physical affection to anyone, lifted David as easily as if he weighed nothing. Hyun-woo's arms were strong and steady, cradling David against his chest. His face remained fierce, daring anyone to comment or interfere. Marcus took a step forward, perhaps to explain or make excuses, but one look from Hyun-woo stopped him cold. That single glance promised consequences that Marcus didn't want to imagine. Marcus stepped back, his confident smirk completely gone, replaced by genuine fear. The other businessmen parted like water as Hyun-woo walked through the restaurant carrying David. Whispers started immediately, but no one dared speak loudly enough for Hyun-woo to hear. In his private car, Hyun-woo took David to his personal doctor, not a hospital. "No one touches what's mine," Hyun-woo said quietly, though David didn't understand what he meant yet. The car was a black luxury sedan with tinted windows and leather seats. Hyun-woo laid David carefully across the back seat, removing his own suit jacket to place it over David like a blanket. He made a phone call in rapid Korean, his tone commanding. Through his fading consciousness, David heard the authority in Hyun-woo's voice and felt, for the first time in 2 years, like someone powerful was on his side. David woke up in a huge, beautiful bedroom. Soft blankets covered him, and his bruises had been treated with medicine. A maid brought him soup and told him, "Master Hyun-woo says you will stay here until you are completely better." The room was unlike anything David had ever experienced. The bed was enormous, with silk sheets in deep navy blue. The ceiling was high with elegant molding, and tall windows showed a view of Seoul's skyline at night, millions of lights twinkling like stars. The furniture was all expensive wood and modern design. A chandelier hung above, smaller than the restaurant's but just as beautiful, casting soft golden light. David touched his face carefully and found professional bandages covering his cuts. His ribs were wrapped in medical tape. Clean clothes had been laid out for him, soft cotton pajamas that felt like clouds against his skin. On the nightstand sat expensive creams and medications, along with a glass of water and fresh flowers. When the maid entered, she was an older Korean woman with kind eyes and a professional manner. She carried a tray with homemade soup that smelled delicious, beef broth with vegetables and rice. "Master Hyun-woo personally selected your meals," she said in careful English. "He wants you to heal properly. You are to rest and recover. Everything you need will be provided." David was confused. Why would a powerful CEO care about a poor waiter? Every day Hyun-woo would visit David's room. At first he just checked if David was healing. But soon they started talking. The first few visits were brief. Hyun-woo would enter in his business suits, having come straight from work. He would stand near the door, maintaining distance, and ask clinical questions. "How is the pain? Can you eat? Do you need anything?" His voice was still cold, his expression controlled. But his eyes told a different story. They showed concern that his words didn't express. By the 4th day Hyun-woo began staying longer. He would sit in the chair beside David's bed, still maintaining some distance but present. They talked about simple things at first, the weather, the food, Seoul's neighborhoods. David learned that Hyun-woo grew up without love, raised to be tough and scary. Hyun-woo learned that David had a kind heart, even after being hurt so badly. "Why do you still smile?" Hyun-woo asked one night. "Because if I stop smiling, the people who hurt me win," David answered. They were sitting together watching the sunset through the tall windows. The sky was painted in oranges and pinks, and the city below was transitioning from day to night. David had been telling a story about his childhood in America, about his mother's cooking and his dreams of traveling the world. Despite everything that had happened to him, the betrayal, the poverty, the violence, his eyes still sparkled when he talked about beautiful things. Hyun-woo had never met anyone like David. In his world, everyone had an angle, everyone wanted something. People smiled at him because he was powerful and rich, because they feared him or needed him. But David's smile was different. It was genuine, coming from a place of choice rather than necessity. David chose kindness even when life had been cruel to him. Something melted inside Hyun-woo's heart. He found himself wanting to protect David from everything bad in the world. David felt safe for the first time in years. They spent evenings reading books together, watching movies, and sharing their dreams. Slowly, David's bruises healed, but something new grew between them: love. Hyun-woo brought books from his personal library, classics, poetry, modern novels. They would sit together on the couch in David's room, reading quietly, sometimes for hours without speaking. The silence between them was comfortable, peaceful. Sometimes Hyun-woo would read passages aloud in Korean, then translate them for David. His voice, usually so commanding and cold in business, became soft and warm during these moments. They watched old movies on the large television, romantic comedies that made David laugh and action films that Hyun-woo secretly enjoyed more than he admitted. David would fall asleep during late-night movies, his head gradually tilting until it rested on Hyun-woo's shoulder. Hyun-woo would freeze at first, and used to such casual intimacy, but then slowly relax, allowing himself this small moment of peace. One evening Hyun-woo took David's hand. "Stay with me," he said. "Not as a guest. Stay as someone special to me." David's eyes filled with happy tears. "Yes," he whispered. The room was lit only by candlelight that evening. Hyun-woo had arranged for a special dinner to be served in David's room, not the medicinal soups of recovery, but real food, celebration food. After dinner, as they sat together, Hyun-woo had taken David's hand in his own. His hands, so powerful and capable of commanding empires, held David's gently as if David was something precious and fragile. But their happiness was noticed by others. Marcus heard that David was living with the richest man in Seoul. He was jealous and angry. He wanted David back, not because he loved him but because he wanted Hyun-woo's money. Marcus began making an evil plan. Marcus sat in his cramped, cheap apartment on the other side of Seoul, scrolling through social media on his phone. He had been searching David's name obsessively for weeks, ever since that night at the restaurant. What he found made his blood boil with jealousy. There were whispers on Korean gossip sites, posts from restaurant staff, speculation about the powerful CEO Hyun-woo and a mysterious foreign man living in his mansion. Marcus's apartment was nothing like the luxury David now enjoyed. The paint was peeling, the furniture was secondhand, and the woman in the red dress had left him the moment she realized his designer clothes were rented and his promises were empty. He was back where he started, broke, alone, and bitter. But this time he saw an opportunity. Marcus contacted David, pretending to be sorry for everything. He sent messages saying, "I made a terrible mistake. I miss you. Can we talk?" The messages were carefully crafted, filled with apologies and promises of change. He claimed to be in therapy, to have realized his mistakes, to have never stopped loving David. Each message was a calculated manipulation, designed to target David's kind heart. At first, David ignored the messages. But Marcus was persistent. He sent flowers with apologetic notes. He sent letters explaining his journey of self-discovery, and how hurting David was his biggest regret. He claimed he wanted nothing from David except forgiveness, a chance to apologize in person so he could heal and move forward. David, who still had a small piece of kindness for his old love, agreed to meet Marcus at a cafe, but he didn't tell Hyun-woo. This decision, made from compassion and a desire to let go of old pain, would prove to be a terrible mistake. David thought he was being strong, facing his past, showing that Marcus no longer had power over him. He didn't realize that Marcus had brought friends, dangerous men who owed Marcus favors and cared nothing about David's safety. The cafe Marcus chose was in a quieter part of Seoul, away from the business district, away from cameras and crowds. "So we can talk privately," Marcus had written. "So I can apologize properly without embarrassment." David agreed, wanting the closure, wanting to finally be free of the shadow Marcus cast over his new happiness. It was a trap. Marcus brought dangerous men with him. They grabbed David, demanding he steal money and secrets from Hyun-woo. When David refused, they hurt him again worse than before and left him in an alley. David arrived at the cafe early, nervous but determined. He wore simple clothes, jeans and a sweater that Hyun-woo had bought him. He ordered tea and sat by the window watching people walk by on the street. His heart raced, but he told himself this was necessary, that forgiveness would set him free. Marcus arrived right on time, alone at first, with that same charming smile David had fallen for years ago. "David," Marcus said warmly, sliding into the seat across from him. "Thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve your time." They talked for a few minutes, Marcus delivering his rehearsed apology with practiced sincerity. Then Marcus suggested they walk to a quieter spot to talk more privately. That's when everything changed. As they walked down a narrow alley behind the cafe, 3 large men appeared from the shadows. David's blood went cold. Marcus's fake apologetic expression melted away, replaced by cold greed. "Here's what's going to happen," Marcus said. "You're going to go back to your rich boyfriend and steal everything you can for us. Bank account numbers, business secrets, whatever we can sell or use." David backed away, his heart pounding. "No," he said firmly. "I won't betray Hyun-woo. He saved me. He cared for me when no one else did." Marcus's face twisted with rage. "You think you're too good for me now? You think living in a mansion for a few weeks makes you better than me? He nodded to his friends. Teach him what happens when people forget where they came from. The attack was brutal and quick. David tried to fight back, but there were too many of them. They beat him in that dirty alley while Marcus watched, occasionally giving instructions. Make sure he understands we're serious. When David still refused to cooperate, still refused to betray Hyun-woo even as blood ran down his face, Marcus grew even angrier. Then you're useless to me, Marcus said coldly. Leave him. They left David bleeding in the alley, his phone smashed, his body broken. He lay there in the garbage and rain, consciousness fading, wondering if this was how his story would end, betrayed again by the same person, dying alone in a foreign country. When Hyun-woo came home and couldn't find David, fear filled his heart, a feeling he hadn't experienced in years. He used all his connections, his men, his power to search the entire city. Hyun-woo arrived home earlier than usual, wanting to surprise David with dinner reservations at Seoul's best restaurant. He had been planning to make their relationship official, to stop hiding what they meant to each other. He carried a small box in his pocket, a simple but meaningful gift, a symbol of his commitment. The mansion was too quiet. Usually, David would be reading in the library or watching the sunset from the balcony. David? Hyun-woo called out, walking through the rooms. Nothing. He checked the bedroom, the kitchen, the gardens. Empty. He asked the staff. No one had seen David leave, but they confirmed he wasn't home. At first, Hyun-woo remained calm, logical. Perhaps David had gone for a walk. But as minutes became hours, that calm began to crack. He called David's phone, straight to voicemail, the sound of a phone that had been destroyed. That's when fear gripped Hyun-woo's heart with icy fingers. This was a feeling Hyun-woo hadn't experienced in years, real, genuine fear. Not the calculated risk assessment of business deals or the strategic caution of navigating dangerous situations. This was raw terror at the thought of losing someone who had become essential to his existence. In just a few weeks, David had become the center of Hyun-woo's world, the reason he came home, the person who made him want to be better. Hyun-woo made phone calls, his voice growing harder with each one. He contacted his security team, his business associates, his underground connections. Within 30 minutes, he had 50 people searching Seoul for David. Street cameras were accessed, informants were questioned, every corner of the city came under scrutiny. Find him, Hyun-woo commanded, his voice like ice. Find him now or don't bother coming back. His men had never heard such urgency in his voice, such barely controlled panic beneath the cold authority. When he finally found David bleeding in that dark alley, something inside Hyun-woo broke and then hardened like steel. Hyun-woo held David close. I promise you, he said with tears in his eyes, no one will ever hurt you again. The call came at 11:47 p.m. One of Hyun-woo's men had found David in an alley behind a cafe in the Itaewon district. Hyun-woo was in his car before the caller finished speaking, driving through Seoul streets with dangerous speed, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. He found David lying in a pool of rainwater mixed with blood. David's face was barely recognizable, swollen, cut, bruised worse than before. His clothes were torn, his body curled in a defensive position even in unconsciousness. Trash and debris surrounded him, as if he was something to be discarded and forgotten. Hyun-woo fell to his knees beside David, his expensive suit soaking in the dirty water. He didn't care. Nothing mattered except the broken man before him. David, he whispered, his voice cracking in a way it never had before. David, please? David's eyes fluttered open, barely focusing. Hyun-woo, he managed to whisper through split lips. I'm sorry. I wouldn't betray you. I told them no. Something inside Hyun-woo shattered at those words. David, beaten and bleeding, was apologizing to him. David, who had refused to betray him even under torture, thought he needed to explain himself. The pain of that realization, combined with the sight of David's injuries, broke through every wall Hyun-woo had built around his heart. Tears ran down Hyun-woo's face, the first tears he had cried since childhood. But even as they fell, something else happened. Behind the breaking, a hardening occurred. Like metal forged in fire, Hyun-woo's resolve became unbreakable. Someone had done this. Someone had hurt the person he loved. And they would pay for it in ways they couldn't imagine. Hyun-woo held David close, carefully lifting him from the filthy ground. I promise you, he said with tears in his eyes, his voice shaking with emotion and fury, no one will ever hurt you again. No one will even get the chance. I will destroy anyone who tries. David, fading in and out of consciousness, heard the promise in Hyun-woo's voice. It wasn't a comfort, it was a declaration of war. And somewhere in his pain, David understood that the world was about to see what happened when someone hurt the person Hyun-woo loved. David recovered at home, but this time Hyun-woo didn't just wait. He declared war. Using his business power and his underground connections, Hyun-woo destroyed Marcus's life piece by piece. David spent the next week in the mansion's medical room, a private facility Hyun-woo maintained in his home, equipped with everything a hospital had. Doctors came and went, nurses monitored his recovery around the clock. But through it all, Hyun-woo was there, sitting beside David's bed with a laptop, making calls, issuing commands. While David healed physically, Hyun-woo worked methodically to dismantle Marcus's entire existence. He started with Marcus's employment. A few phone calls to the right people, and suddenly Marcus found himself unemployed. Every job application was rejected. Every interview was mysteriously cancelled. Companies that had never heard of Hyun-woo somehow received anonymous tips about Marcus's character and past crimes. He got Marcus fired from every job. He made sure Marcus's new girlfriend left him when she learned the truth about him. Hyun-woo had investigators compile a complete file on Marcus, every lie he'd told, every person he'd stolen from, every rule he'd broken. The girlfriend received this file anonymously, along with proof that Marcus had been planning to scam her too. She left him within a day, taking with her the expensive gifts Marcus had bought with borrowed money. He made Marcus lose everything just like Marcus had done to David. Marcus's credit cards were maxed out from his lifestyle of pretending to be wealthy. When he couldn't pay, his accounts were frozen. His apartment lease was mysteriously not renewed. The landlord received a better offer from an anonymous buyer who wanted the whole building. Marcus's friends, the men who had helped beat David, found themselves under investigation for various crimes. But Hyun-woo didn't stop there. He found every person who had hurt David and made sure they faced the law for their crimes. The men who had attacked David were arrested for assault, with video evidence mysteriously appearing that showed their faces clearly. Marcus's other victims came forward when they heard someone was finally holding him accountable. Marcus ended up in jail for theft and assault. Justice was finally served. The charges included stealing from David, the assault in the alley, and several other crimes that investigators uncovered. Marcus's trial was swift. Hyun-woo made sure the prosecutors had every piece of evidence they needed, delivered in organized files with timelines and witness statements. During David's recovery, Hyun-woo never left his side. "You taught me that having a heart doesn't make you weak," Hyun-woo said. "It makes you stronger than any power or money." David smiled, holding Hyun-woo's hand. "And you taught me that I deserve to be loved and protected." The physical wounds healed faster than expected, but the emotional ones took longer. David had nightmares, waking up screaming, reliving the attacks, the betrayal. Every time, Hyun-woo was there, holding him, whispering reassurances in both Korean and English until David's breathing calmed and he could sleep again. During the day they talked. Really talked in ways they hadn't before. David told Hyun-woo everything, his childhood dreams, his fears, his shame at being betrayed twice by the same person, his guilt at not telling Hyun-woo about meeting Marcus. He cried, releasing years of pain he'd been holding inside. Hyun-woo shared his own story, a childhood without warmth, raised by a father who saw emotion as weakness, trained from young age to be hard and calculating. "I built walls so high that I forgot what it felt like to care about someone," Hyun-woo admitted. "Then you came into my life, bleeding on my restaurant floor, and somehow you climbed over every wall I'd built. You taught me that having a heart doesn't make you weak," Hyun-woo said one afternoon as they sat together in the garden. The sun was setting, painting the sky in soft purples and golds. "It makes you stronger than any power or money. You refused to betray me even when they were hurting you. That's not weakness, that's the strongest thing I've ever seen." David smiled, holding Hyun-woo's hand. His grip was stronger now, his body healing. "And you taught me that I deserve to be loved and protected. For so long I thought I had to accept being treated badly. You showed me what real love looks like." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sunset together. Hyun-woo's garden was beautiful, carefully maintained, with flowers from around the world. But Hyun-woo had never really noticed it before David. Now he saw beauty everywhere because David had taught him to look for it. "I love you," Hyun-woo said simply. It was the first time he'd said those words to anyone in his adult life. They felt foreign on his tongue but absolutely right in his heart. "I love you too," David replied, tears of happiness in his eyes. These tears were different from all the ones he'd cried before, tears of joy, of hope, of finally being safe. Months later, they stood together at Hyun-woo's company party. David now worked as Hyun-woo's personal assistant and partner in life. Everyone in Seoul knew their story, how a kind waiter had melted the heart of the coldest CEO in Korea, and how that CEO had gone to war for the person he loved. The company party was held in the ballroom of Seoul's most prestigious hotel. Chandeliers sparkled overhead, and the city's most powerful people mingled with champagne glasses. But this party was different from all the others Hyun-woo had hosted. This time, David stood beside him, not as a servant but as an equal, as a partner. David wore a perfectly tailored suit that Hyun-woo had commissioned from the best tailor in Seoul. He looked confident, healthy, happy, a completely different person from the broken waiter who had collapsed months ago. His wounds had healed, leaving only faint scars that he no longer tried to hide. They were part of his story, proof that he had survived. Hyun-woo introduced David to everyone with pride. "This is David, my partner," he would say, and the emphasis on partner made it clear he meant in every sense business and personal. Some people were surprised, some were supportive, and some whispered behind their hands. Hyun-woo didn't care about any of it. Let them talk. "Are you happy?" Hyun-woo asked David during a quiet moment on the balcony, away from the crowd. The city sparkled below them, Seoul at its most beautiful. "More than I ever dreamed possible," David answered, and it was absolutely true. 6 months ago he'd been alone, broke and broken. Now he had love, purpose, and someone who valued him for exactly who he was. They had both been broken by their pasts. But together they had healed each other, found justice, and built a love stronger than any challenge. David learned he was worthy of respect and love. Hyun-woo learned that true strength comes from protecting those you care about. And Marcus learned that hurting good people always has a price. Their story became a message to everyone. Love can heal the deepest wounds, kindness can change the coldest hearts, and standing up for what's right will always win in the end. Inside the ballroom, people toasted to Hyun-woo's success. But what they were really witnessing was something more valuable than any business deal. They were seeing two people who had found each other against all odds. Continue. 10:40 a.m. Who had chosen love over fear, who had proven that even the most broken hearts could heal when treated with genuine care. As the night ended and guests began to leave, David and Hyun-woo stood together, watching the sunrise begin to paint the sky. A new day was beginning, and for the first time in both their lives, they faced it not alone but together, stronger for having survived their storms, grateful for having found each other in the chaos.